everybody, my name is Spencer and I'm going to talk about my top 10 two-player games. Now I play a lot of games two-player, whether they have a higher player capacity or are two-player only, just because a lot of the times it's just me and my wife Lara playing. So I've played a lot of games at two-player, and interestingly enough, I don't have many two-player only games. Since it normally is just the two of us, we often play games that have the higher player count. So this list is going to be, it's not comprehensive, because I haven't played all of the two-player only games in the world, but out of the games that we own and the games that we've played, these are my top 10 favorite. What informed my decision for this list is a couple of things. One, it has to be a two-player game. Two, it can't be too long. It's either we're playing a game at the end of the day after our kids have gone to bed and we're tired, we don't want to sit at the game for a couple hours, sit at the table for a couple hours playing a game. We want to play through something that's not too long. Can't be too complex either, because again, we've spent the entire day dealing with other things. We don't want to bash our brains in over some kind of complex game. And thirdly, we don't want it to be too attacky, if you get what I'm saying. We don't want it to be too head-to-head, too direct combat, just because that's not always the best kind of game for a married couple to play. There are some exceptions on the list for certain reasons, and I'll get to those whenever I get to them, but let's get started. Let's get started with number 10, and for me that is Haven from Red Raven Games. Man, this game looks good. If the game wasn't any good, it'd still be a joy to get out on the table just to look at. But luckily for me, and for you maybe, it is a good game. Now Haven has what I think is a really fun theme. You've got the city folk who are trying to grow their city and acquire land from the forest, and then you've got the forest dwellers who are trying to protect the forest from the encroaching city. And so you have both sides, both players playing both sides of that, and they do play a little bit differently. They've got different ability decks, but they're very balanced. What's interesting is there are basically two parts to the game. One is an area control kind of thing going on, where you're trying to place havens over in the forest area, and part of the game is you get points based on how many havens you control. But then the other part is over on the other side of the game, you've got these tokens that you're playing, and they're basically offerings to these elements, these giant not monsters, but giant creature kinds of things. You've got water, plant, and stone. So in the middle of each side of this playing area, you've got different numbers you're trying to get to please these elements. And so you're trying to play cards down to match those numbers, but you may or may not be able to see what your opponent's playing. So you're trying to get the closest to the number, closer than your opponent, but again, if you bust, if you go over the number that's there, well then you don't win that particular token. The tokens are worth points, and you get points based on if you have the majority in the different types. But I think that's a neat part of the game, is that you've got it separated into two. Your strategy has to be, you have to have two different kinds of strategies, one for that and then one for the control over the forest. If you want to see a playthrough of it just to see how it works, Lara and I did do a live stream of it, and I'm not going to tell you who won, because I want you to go watch the live stream right here on the Lighten Up Initiative YouTube channel. Number 9 is a fairly new game system called Unmatched, and that's from Restoration Games and Mondo. There's a little bit of a collaboration there. This is a remaking of a game called Epic Duels from several years ago that was a Star Wars themed game. And basically what this is, you've got factions of different characters that are just going head to head, fighting each other and trying to knock each other out, trying to reduce their hit points down to 0. Now this is an exception, as I said. We don't normally like head-to-head rules, but what makes this game great is that's more tactical than it is just head-to-head, straight-on attacking. So the one that we own is Bigfoot versus Robin Hood, which is an awesome pairing. Whoever had the idea to pair those two is brilliant. But what I really enjoy about that is you have to play to the strengths of each character. So as you take turns playing each role, you get to adjust to what their strengths are. So obviously Robin Hood is going to be better at shooting arrows from a distance, and you want to try to stay away from Bigfoot as best you can. Whereas Bigfoot's trying to stay hidden. He doesn't want to get attacked or be found out, because that's what Bigfoot does. He hides. But Bigfoot is going to run, crash through the trees, and try to pound Robin Hood into the ground without being hit with an arrow. Robin Hood also has several helpers, merry men, if you want to, that he uses to attack and to kind of corner Bigfoot, if you will. And then Bigfoot has his sidekick, which is a jackalope. that has his own dial of health, and it's interesting to be able to use the characters and their sidekicks to their advantages, and really embrace what their strengths are. And I like that. It's more to think about than just how am I going to get my opponent down to 0. It's how do I not only attack them, but it's also how to defend myself and keep from getting hit. It looks great. The graphic design is awesome. The artwork is fantastic. It's a wonderful game. Now, it's short. It's like a 20-minute game, and it's easy to learn. Great fit for the criteria I have for this list. Now, I expect this might grow up on my list as I play more of the sets. Like the one I'm most excited about that just came out is Cobble and Fog, where you can play as the Invisible Man, or Dracula, or Sherlock and Watson, or Jekyll and Hyde, which are some awesome characters from the Victorian era, and you can mix and match characters however you want. So you could have Bigfoot versus Sherlock, which I think is hilarious. But again, exciting to explore the strengths and weaknesses of each character. So, Unmatched, number 9. The publisher Cosmos has done a line of 2-player games. You come in a square box, small box games that only 2-player, and they've got several of them. And actually, there are a couple that are on this list. And the first one is the Rose King. Now, this game I found interesting in my research actually came out back in 1992, and its theme was called Texas, and its theme was ranchers versus farmers. And I really like that theme. I would love to track it down, of course. It's long out of print. I don't know if I'd ever be able to find a copy. But in the Rose King, it's set in the War of Roses, which is Lancaster versus the York factions. And it's an area control game. You got a square board that's got a grid of squares. And the goal is to control areas on the board of different sizes. So as you play the game, you've got this crown token that starts in the middle. And you're going to be playing cards that move that crown token around the board. You'll have a sword on the card that points in a certain direction, and a number that tells you how many spaces you can move the crown. Wherever the crown ends up, that's where you can put one of your color tokens. And what you're trying to do is create several large areas of your tokens. At the end of the game, you'll score based on how many tokens are in each of your areas. And of course, the larger, the better. Now, it's definitely an abstract game, so there's not a whole lot of theme there, but it is fun. Sometimes that's all you want is an abstract game, and in this one, that's what you get. Moving around that crown, knowing which card to play when. You've got some special ability cards that you can play, but it's very strategic on how you move. You can even convert some of the tokens to your own faction. And all of those things, whether it's the moving of the cards, trying to use those power cards to your advantage, are all great, interesting decisions that you have to make. It's got a small footprint. You can play it on a TV tray if you want to while you're watching a movie, which I don't recommend because then you're not paying attention to the game. But if you wanted to, you could do that. And it's quick. It doesn't take too long, and it's very easy to learn. All wonderful reasons for me to put it at number 8 on this list. Speaking of abstract but fun games, and also from the Cosmos 2-player line, is Lost Cities here at number 7. Now, I say abstract. The idea of the game is you are a team of archaeologists trying to form these expedition routes, trying to come back with these different artifacts for these companies that are funding your expeditions. There's a board running between each player, and each board has a different color card to tell you where you're going to play your own cards. And you start, basically each card represents your expedition route, and you start at negative 20 points for each one because that's supposed to symbolize, okay, this is how much you owe if you don't come back with anything on your expedition. And so you're going to play cards down. The idea is to get back up to 20. They all have numbers on them. You want to put enough cards in each column to get up to 20, but you don't have all of the cards in your hand to begin with. You may have a 1 or a 3 of one color, and you don't know as the game goes on if you're going to have the cards to get back up to that 20. And you only lose those minus 20, you only lose 20 points if you start an expedition. So you can only choose to start 3 expeditions and ignore the other 2 colors. So I like that decision of, do I start here? There's a little bit of a pressure luck. Do I start here? And hopefully, based on the decisions I make, I'll get the cards that I need to. But you also have to pay attention to what your opponent's doing, because there are only certain cards, only one number of each cards. So there's only one 1, only 1 2 of each color. So if your opponent plays a 2, you know that you can't play that. So you've got to make up the difference with some of your other cards. It's great. Great decisions, great fun. Since it's not technically head-to-head, you're still watching what your opponent does and kind of cursing them if they get the card that you want. Some really great moments playing Lost Cities, and I love it. There are 3 games on this list that have been distilled into 2-player versions from the original versions, and the first one is Cosmic Encounter Duel at number 6. So the Cosmic Encounter, the regular game, is 3 to 5 players, the base game. And basically what you're doing is you're negotiating, you're trying to take control over planets, not over a total of 5 planets, but there's a lot of negotiation going on with the number of players that you're playing with. You're trying to get people to join your side. Help me colonize this planet, where the person you're trying to, over their planet that you're trying to take, is trying to get people onto their side of the team to defend. But how do you do that in a 2-player game? Well, you don't. So in the 2-player version, you're still trying to colonize 5 planets, but you don't have any way to negotiate with people to help defend you. So it's pretty different from its predecessor. I don't think I would say that it's anywhere comparable, just because of how different it is. So there are some familiar elements, and people are always going to say, how does this compare to the first version? Well, I'd say that it's just so different that you can't really compare it. But I like it because it's so chaotic. The way it works is, to determine what you do every turn, there are these 3 decks. There's the refresh deck, there's the event deck, and the discovery deck. And as you draw a card, it tells you what to do. So you just draw a discovery deck, says, okay, we're going to discover a planet this turn, and you two are going to have a duel over it to see who gains control over it. At the bottom of that card, it'll tell you what deck to draw from next. So it might be event, or it might be a refresh card. Because of that, you kind of can't anticipate what's going to happen. And so that's chaotic. And then you've got your alien powers that are chaotic, that can completely change the rules of the game. The events that come out can completely change the rules of a game. So you have to go in with that mentality of, this game is going to be very chaotic. A lot of times it's going to completely mess up my strategy, but that's okay, because that can be really, really fun. When I first played this with Lara, the first couple of times we played it, it was kind of hard to form an opinion on it, because we just didn't know. We were expecting one thing from playing Cosmic Encounter. This didn't really live up to what that was. But if you embrace that chaos and go into it knowing that you're just going to have a fun time, you're going to enjoy this game. So that's what I suggest. If you're going to give it a try, just know it's going to be chaotic, and go along for the ride. Number 5, I just kind of picked up on a whim from Target, didn't know what to expect, didn't look up any reviews, and I was happily surprised, obviously, if it's at number 5, and that is Spirits of the Wild. This is from Mattel, and what you do in this game is you've got a bag of stones and a bowl, and at certain points of the game, stones are going to come out and be put in that bowl, and each player has the same set of cards that tell you to do certain things. So that might be draw 2 stones from the bowl, or draw some stones from the bag, whatever. And what you're trying to do is fulfill certain set collections. So it might be 3 gems of different colors, or 2 pairs of the same color, or 1 of each color down here. They're each going to give you a different amount of points based on how much you fulfill those conditions. But at its core, it's a set collection game. But it looks great. There's this awesome looking fox that's rubber, and you use it to block off certain areas of your opponent's board so they can't add stones to it. The stones are great. The bag, you draw them out of the bag and put them in that bowl, is really neat. And it's just a nice, simple to understand game, nice to look at, fun, not too head-to-head. You're kind of each focusing on your own board, but you do have those moments where there are stones in the bowl that you want to get, but your opponent might take, either because they need it or because they know you need it. So that goes into your decision making too. It's great, pretty short, only 20 minutes, so it's great to break out if you don't have a lot of time to play a game, and I highly recommend it. Number 4 on my list is another game that was taken from a large version and distilled down into a 2-player version, and that's Imhotep the Duel. Now, ask me if I've played Imhotep. No, I haven't, but I've played the Duel, and I know that I love it. So much so that I don't even know if I need to play the original game, Imhotep. Now, this is from Cosmos. It's, again, part of their 2-player line. But in this game, you are both players are fighting over trying to make the best monuments in Egypt. And you're one of the Egyptian mummy things, whatever they're called, and you're trying to build an obelisk, a pyramid, and then I think it's some kind of tomb or something that you're trying to build with these various pieces that you get from these ships. So the playing area is this little board and then 6 ships on each side of it, and each ship is filled up with different resources, whether they're pieces of brick or little gems, whatever it is that you use to build up your monuments. They're on those little boats, and you take turns placing workers on this board, and depending on how you place them and then remove them, you're going to get those resources from those ships. So there's a lot to think about whenever you place those workers down. Of if you remove them at a certain point, you might be giving your opponent some of those resources. Now you can remove them at any time, so you can wait until a row gets filled with workers, or you can remove just one. And if you do that, though, you're wasting a lot of resources. They're just going to be thrown away. So there's a lot to think about when it comes down to choosing where to place your workers and then where to remove them. You also have to decide how much you're going to go into your monuments, because if your opponent gets too far ahead of you, then it's going to be unlikely for you to catch up. For example, on the obelisk, if your opponent gets up to 5 or 6 pieces before you even get one, it's going to be hard for you to catch up. So you either need to not let them get that far of a lead before you, or just give up on those and really focus on the other ones. So again, there's a lot to think about, but it's a quick game, it's a fun game, and I love it. Another game that I have not played the original version of, but love the re-implementation, is Fox and the Force Duet at number 3. This game, when I played it, I had no idea what to expect. But this is a 2-player cooperative trick-taking game, and the way that this game works, I just love. So what happens is you've got this little tiny board, and the board has this little path on it, and on the path there are different places where you can pick up gems, and the idea is to pick up all of these gems, and the way you do that is by moving this little token back and forth across the board. Wherever it lands, you get those gem tokens. But the way you move it is by playing tricks. Whenever you play a trick, each player plays a card. Whoever wins the trick, the token is moved in their direction, and it's moved a number of spaces that are on both cards combined. So you have to, and you can't talk about what you're going to play. So it's very interesting trying to read your partner to figure out what they're going to play, try to keep in mind what they've already played, and make the right decision of you don't want it to go too far off the edge of the board because that penalizes you. But you also want it to move enough spaces to be able to get over here, get over there. The back and forth and the threat of going off the board, I just really enjoy that. And many times it comes out and it breaks out into humorous moments of laughter. And that's one of the things I love about games, is if they can make you laugh for the good reasons, then they're very memorable to me. And Fox and the Force Duet is a memorable game. Now I mentioned not liking attacky games where you have to straight on attack your opponent, or at least as a 2-player only game. But it's funny that the number 2 game on my list is one of those, and that's Dice Masters. Now there are several different versions of Dice Masters. There's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Dice Masters, there's Marvel, there's DC, there's even Dungeons and Dragons. You can find almost any type of intellectual property as Dice Masters. But the one I enjoy the most, and the only one I've played actually, is Justice League Dice Masters. And the DC characters are my favorite, so of course this is the one that I would like. Dice Masters is a bag building game in that you have a bag that you're going to be taking dice, buying them, putting into your bag, and making your bag more powerful. The dice represent your superheroes, and as you draw them out of the bag, you can send them out into a field to attack your opponent. And you'll roll them, and you'll try to roll the better sides of the dice. Some sides have more powerful faces of your superheroes, and some can only be used for energy. So it all comes down to your luck of the draw, but at the same time, there is some strategy about where to play, when and where to play your heroes to fight against your opponent. And you just get this feeling that you're controlling this team of superheroes against your opponent, and you can have all kinds of team ups, like having Lex Luthor and the Joker and Batman on the same team, or any kind of mixture of that. And in fact, some will give you bonuses if you have the right characters on the same team, like Batman and Robin, for example. You get a bonus ability by them being on the same team. So it's fun not only to play the game, but also to build your team. I enjoy that aspect of the game as well. This is one that Lara and I have played over and over and over again, and we have this rivalry going on of who can be the better dice master, and we're pretty much tied. We've played many games, but we're pretty much tied at this point, so I'd say we're evenly matched. But I love the matches that we've played of Dice Masters, even when I lose. And here we are at number 1. My number 1 most loved two-player game is Raptor, designed by Bruno Fedudi and Bruno Cathala. When I was making this list, I knew that this was number 1, and then I fill out the rest of the list because I like this game so much. So this is another asymmetrical game, and one player will play the mama raptor trying to protect her 3 little baby raptors who have these little teeny tiny adorable miniature figures. And then you have the other team, which is the team of scientists, who's trying to collect the raptors and study them. But each one plays differently. Since the objectives are different, you need to be more tactical as the raptor, trying to stay away from the scientists, but also trying to eat them. And then, of course, as the scientist, you're trying to avoid the raptor, but try to get around to where her babies are. It has one of my favorite mechanisms in it, which is the simultaneous action selection mechanism, where each player will play a card that's got an action on it and a number. You put it face down, you reveal them. Whoever has the lower number will go first. And sometimes in most cases, the lower numbers have the less powerful abilities, whereas the higher numbers have more powerful abilities because, well, you have the lesser likelihood of going first. And I love that I don't know which one to play. I know I want to play this ability, but the likelihood, I've seen that she's played these cards already, so most likely it's going to be a lower number. I'm not going to be able to do this action before she does her card. So making those decisions, I like the theme, it's a fun theme, and it's just an all-around well-done game. If you haven't played it, I definitely recommend you try out Raptor. And that's my top 10 two-player games. I would love to know what your top two-player games are. Let me know in the comments below. If there are some games on this list that you think are terrible, let me know. Tell me why you don't think they belong on this list. If you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the Lighten Up initiative here on YouTube. And be sure to click the little bell icon to be sure you're notified whenever I upload a new video. You can expect all kinds of videos here on the Lighten Up initiative. There are reviews, there are comedy sketches, there are tutorials, there are previews. So you want to make sure you're notified when something new comes out so you don't miss it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm Spencer Williams, and until next time, don't take the board game hobby too seriously. Just lighten up.